Welcome to today's HealthLine webinar from the American Association of Kidney Patients, calling all researchers, learn about funding opportunities available now through the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program, CDMRP, with our allied partners at the U.S. Department of Defense. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Jerome Bailey, and I'm AAKP's Director of Patient Engagement and Advocacy. AAKP HealthLine webinars fall under our Center for Patient Research and Education. We believe patients and care partners' education is an integral part of treatment and protection of patient lives, and we work to ensure that the patient has a central role in research and guidance that are designed to determine optimal approaches and strategies for providing healthcare services, assistance programs, and access to new products and services. We built this center with the latest polling and engagement technologies to ensure that kidney patients take a central role in informing the federal, academic, and private sector research shaping the next generation of healthcare services, assistance programs, and innovative new treatments, and encourage you to respond to our flash surveys and other engagement opportunities that you receive via email as a member of AAKP. I'd now like to introduce Paul Conway, AAKP's Chair of Policy and Global Affairs. Paul has also served as a peer reviewer in patient-centered research efforts for the U.S. Department of Defense Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. Paul will take a moment to go over some insights gleaned from a recent flash survey to AAKP members and allied professionals and researchers about the importance of federal research programs like CDMRP. Paul?
Hey, thank you very much, Jerome, and welcome back to the team. Jerome has been a fantastic patient advocate over many years, and we're fortunate to have him back with AAKP's professional team. On behalf of myself and our new president, Ed Hickey, a U.S. Marine Corps veteran, we welcome you to today's program. You know, a lot of different people know what the Department of Defense does in our nation's history and our nation's destiny. Not a lot of them understand what the department also does on research and development and innovation. They have had a profound impact on our nation and our economy over many, many decades. And they've also had a profound impact on research and development related to different types of diseases, including kidney disease. For our policy agenda in 2023, we want to make certain that this department's efforts in the field of medical research are brought to a wider audience. And this has been a very specific charge by our president, Ed Hickey. Himself a Marine Corps veteran, he has also been somebody who's been very, very involved in DoD programs over 30 years. So it's a pleasure for us to go ahead and help the Department of Defense spread the word about this program. And let me walk through some slides here of awareness of the DoD program and the opportunities that patients and researchers recognize. We rolled out to our database of kidney patients, family members, care partners, health professionals, researchers, academia, and kidney stakeholders to ask them several questions to give us insight in the setting for today's event. What we did is we asked patients and care partners if they were familiar with the CDMRP program. We had 10% of our patients and care partners saying yes. Overwhelmingly, 80% were not aware of it. And some people just weren't certain. And in this slide, we had given a small explanation about what a patient's role in the program could be as a peer reviewer in taking a look at potential funding opportunities and assessing them. Fully 30% right off the bat said they would be interested in participating in that. 20% said no, but most interestingly to us, 50% wanted more information, part of the point of today's program. And then we also asked whether or not patients and care partners would be willing to share more information about the program with their medical professionals or the researchers they work with, since so many of us receive our care at leading universities and health centers. 36% said yes, they would want to be a partner in sharing that information with the research community. 16% said no, but again, most interesting for today's program, 47% of the patients and care partners said they'd want to be actively involved in sharing more information about this program with the research community. And then we just asked a general question about the interest that people had, patients and care partners, in the fact that not just the federal government broadly, but that the Department of Defense was involved in funding research to support kidney diseases. 95% were interested in that fact, and we see that as a very favorable indicator for being able to get patients and care partners much more involved this year. We posed a similar set of questions to healthcare professionals and researchers, and on this one, the results were just as interesting. Over a quarter of those that we asked in the research and healthcare professional community were familiar with the program. 57% were not, and 17% needed more information or they weren't certain of it. But for those who said no, that is a huge opportunity for us as patients and as advocates to enlist more of the researchers we work with. They might presently be working with PCORI and other funding mechanisms, but we want them to get involved with the Department of Defense's efforts. So we asked them more particularly if they'd be interested in reviewing grants. 17% said yes. If they'd be interested in applying for grants, 17% said yes. Less than 25% said no. But again, for today's program, 48% said they needed more information. That's our target zone. We asked if they had previous experience under one of these DoD-funded studies or in a project. 17% said yes. 83% said no. And again, for our purposes, we're targeting that 83%. And finally, when we asked all participants in our survey on a final question whether or not they wanted to get immediately involved, the great news is 35% right off the bat provided all their full contact information and filled out the contact sheet. So when we step back and look at the results, what we're saying is that there's a huge opportunity to involve more people, more patients, more caregivers, and especially more researchers and research institutions in the tremendous opportunities that exist through the Department of Defense. And again, this is a charge from our president at AAKP, Ed Hickey. It's important for us to get as many different people involved in this program, since AAKP is so active on Capitol Hill, requesting appropriations to go into the program for kidney disease. Just last week, the American Association of Kidney Patients and our good allies at the American Society of Nephrology had over 50 congressional visits on Capitol Hill to talk about several issues, but prime among them was the great efforts the U.S. Department of Defense has been doing in the research of rare diseases and other diseases, and especially kidney disease. We think it's a fine opportunity for those who work side by side with kidney patients to try to drive innovation and better research. So we appreciate your attending today and listening more and finding out opportunities where you can be more effective in helping DoD get the word out about the great efforts that they're doing and the efforts they have available to fund researchers. Jerome, I'll throw it back over to you, and thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and it's great to be back with the AAKP team. So it's my pleasure now to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, Catherine Argue. Dr. Argue serves as the Deputy Program Manager for the peer-reviewed medical research program within the Congressionally Directed Medical Research Programs, U.S. Army Medical Research and Development Command. Dr. Argue is responsible for the execution of the PRMRP program lifecycle, including the annual investment strategy, development of program announcements, application review, funding of awards, and oversight of in-progress research. Dr. Argue joined CDMRP as Science Officer in 2018. As a Science Officer, she provided scientific management and support to the PRMRP portfolio related to neuroscience, internal medicine, endocrinology, and metabolism. Dr. Argue holds a PhD in pharmacological and psychological science from St. Louis University School of Medicine. Dr. Argue, we are happy to have you join us today and look forward to your presentation.
All right. Thank you, Jerome. Hopefully everyone can hear me okay. I wanted to start out by really thanking the AAKP for putting together this opportunity for us to engage with this community. I think the survey results highlight really the importance of us doing this type of stakeholder engagement. And so I hope this will be really beneficial for you all to learn a little bit more about CDMRP and the funding opportunities that we have for kidney-related conditions within the peer-reviewed medical research program, or PRMRP. This is just a bit of an outline of the talk that I'll be giving today. We will start with an overview of CDMRP as a whole. All of our programs share a similar cycle and review process, so I'll share that which is common across all of our programs. And then I'll get into a little bit more of the specific details about the peer-reviewed medical research program, which holds a lot of the funding opportunities relevant to this community. We'll talk about the specific funding opportunities that we have for this year, how you can apply, and then end by giving you some additional resources and strategies for success if you choose to submit an application to us. This slide just shares the overall vision and mission of CDMRP. Our vision is to transform healthcare through innovative and impactful research, and we accomplish this through responsibly managing collaborative research that discovers, develops, and delivers healthcare solutions for the service members, veterans, and the American public. This slide just shares a little bit about who CDMRP is as a whole, so I won't go through absolutely every point on this slide, just to hit a few of the key notes. The CDMRP was first started in Congress in 1992, and it was really in response to grassroots lobbying efforts where some members of the Breast Cancer Coalition lobbied for funds. And from that effort, the Congress started the CDMRP, and funds were given to the Department of Defense to manage these funding opportunities. The other thing that I really want to highlight on this slide, which is something that is a bit unique to CDMRP and sets us apart from other funding organizations, is that even though we are a federally funded organization, we can fund research conducted in institutions around the world. So we're open to funding individuals from academia, nonprofit organizations such as that, as well as for-profits and organizations outside of the United States. This slide continues on with highlighting some of the hallmarks of CDMRP. So when the funds were first given to the Department of Defense to manage medical research, this was a bit of a new endeavor. And so they engaged the National Academy of Medicine to provide a recommendation on how this should be accomplished. And what resulted from that is engagement was our two-tier review process, which we kind of refer to as our secret sauce of how funding decisions and recommendations are made within CDMRP. And I'll be giving more details about that in a few slides. But this National Academy of Medicine recommended model that was started in 1992 is the same one that we use today. The other point that I really want to highlight on this slide is our consumer involvement. And I will give a little bit more information about this. But as I mentioned, CDMRP was started in response to grassroots lobbying efforts and continues to exist today through these lobbying efforts of a lot of advocacy groups and patient efforts. And so we really take that to heart, that consumers are a true stakeholder of the program, and we consider them to be the true north of the program. They are who lobbied for the funds, and we really want to make sure that we are meeting their needs and how we manage those funds. A few other key points that I want to highlight is just about our funding opportunities. Some things that are a little bit different is that there is a lot of funding flexibility within how our funds are given. The entire budget is available to the investigators from upfront, as opposed to other funding organizations that just give a year at a time. So this gives a little bit of flexibility if research tends to move a little bit faster or slower than originally anticipated. You do have the flexibility to carry over funds or, move funds from year 3 to year 1 if you decide to move around order of experiments or anything like that. The other really important thing that I want to highlight is that we do not operate on a pay line based on scientific merit scores. Instead, our funding recommendations are based on a little bit more than just scientific merit. We also consider portfolio composition, adherence to the award mechanism that the application was put in response to, as well as the relative impact. This slide is just sharing the full list of CDMRP programs for the fiscal year 2023. I just wanted to put this up here because there might be some other programs that are of interest to the group here today. For example, there is an entire program dedicated to kidney cancer. However, you'll see highlighted over towards the right of your screen the peer-reviewed medical research program, and that will be the focus for most of the talk today. Now I will get into how CDMRP operates their program cycle and tell you a little bit more about that two-tier review process that I alluded to on the previous slide. So we start out every year with receiving an annual appropriation from Congress. And once we receive that appropriation, that allows us to hold our vision setting meetings in which we really set forth the strategy for how we will spend that year's budget. We decide what program opportunities will be released and work out some details of what the specifics are that we're going to ask for in those program announcements. Then the funding opportunities are released. All of our funding opportunities require some sort of pre-application, and I'll tell you a little bit more details about what those pre-applications look like for some of the PRMRP specific mechanisms. A few of them do require invitations to submit a full application. Others are a little less formal and do not require that invitation. We then move into full application receipt, and then that's where our two-tier review process comes in, where we first have peer review, followed by programmatic review. Then the funding recommendations are moved, and after that, you move into the cycle where the active research is being managed, and the whole process will start over again the next year with the annual appropriation being received from Congress. So this slide kicks off kind of what I really want to highlight about the two-tier review process, and that, like I said, we do not have a pay line based on scientific merit. Instead, we kind of work at this partnership between peer review, where the scientific merit is assessed, and then followed by programmatic review, where a few other criteria are also taken into consideration, and all of these things are weighed against one another to come up with our final recommended for funding list. These are the details about the CDMRP peer review process. What is really unique about our peer review process is that during peer review, when applications are being assessed for their scientific merit, we do not compare applications directly to one another. Instead, during peer review, proposals are given more of an absolute score of their scientific merit. The applicants will receive a summary statement that lets them know their score, as well as the comments underlying that score. The other thing I really want to highlight is that we do not have standing panels. As I mentioned a few slides ago, all of our funding opportunities require some sort of pre-application process. And the purpose of the pre-application process is to let us know what applications to expect for that year, so that we can generate really specific peer review panels that will have the necessary expertise to evaluate the proposals that we are receiving for that year. So we have brand new, unique peer review panels assembled on an annual basis based on what applications come in. The other thing that I want to highlight about the peer review process is that we do involve consumer reviewers within this peer review process. On the summary statements, the consumer reviewers' comments will typically talk about the impact criteria. However, they are a full voting member of the peer review panel that will be contributing to the overall score that applicants receive. And so it's really important to keep that in mind when drafting applications for the CDMRP, that you're always keeping the consumer or the patient in mind, so that you can really speak to their needs, because that is, as I said, they're our true north. And that is one of the things that is really important to us, to make sure that we are funding research that fits their needs. Following peer review, we have our second tier of review, which we call the programmatic review. Since during peer review, applications were not compared against one another and they were just given an absolute score, programmatic review is now where we are going to do the more direct award to award comparison. So applicants that scored really strongly in peer review are going to be looked at very carefully during programmatic review, and they're going to look at all of the strengths and the weaknesses that were highlighted on the peer review summary statement and use that to perform a comparison of one application to the next. In addition to looking at the scientific merit as indicated by the peer review scores and summary statements, they're also going to be looking very carefully at the adherence to the award mechanism's intent, the relative innovation and or impact. Impact is one of those things that's really important for all of our award mechanisms. Innovation is something that you'll need to look at the particular mechanism that you're applying to see whether or not innovation is one of the key criteria that we're looking for with that mechanism. They're also going to look at relevance to program goals, which I'll be sharing what our program goals are for this year in a few slides. and also consideration of portfolio composition. So making sure that we're spreading the wealth, so to speak, and not putting all of our funding within one bucket. Again, similar to peer review, we do involve consumer reviewers on the programmatic panel, and they are full voting members of the programmatic panel. And they join together with clinicians and researchers and program staff from other funding organizations. We do have a standing programmatic panel. You can take a look at our website and see the members of our programmatic panel. However, to make sure we have the necessary expertise, we do fill in based on the applications we receive with some ad hoc reviewers that do vary from year to year. The outcome from the programmatic review tier will be the funding recommendation letter. So all of the applicants will receive a letter letting them know whether or not they were selected for funding that year. So I've highlighted this on a couple of slides with the hallmarks of CDMRP and also how we involve consumer reviewers within both the peer and programmatic review stage. The one thing that I hadn't mentioned yet is that we do try to do a consumer involvement as well during our vision setting and when we're designing the program goals. So we do outreach to the advocacy groups and participants from our consumer reviewers and see what their needs are, what their priorities are, and we try to reflect that in the funding opportunities that we put forth, and then they will, ultimately weigh in with the funding decisions that are made. So now I will be getting into some specifics about the peer-reviewed medical research program. As you can see here, the overall vision of PRMRP is to improve the healthcare and well-being of all military service members, veterans, and beneficiaries. And similar to the overall CDMRP mission, our mission is to encourage, identify, select, and manage medical research projects of clear scientific merit that lead to impactful advances in healthcare of service members, veterans, and beneficiaries. This program was first started in 1999, and our congressional language is a little bit unique from some of the other CDMRP programs. Instead of having a very specific disease or condition that the program as a whole is focused on, our direction from Congress is to support research of clear scientific merit and direct relevance to military health in specified topic areas. So every year with our annual appropriation, we receive this list of topic areas. And since these are on the Department of Defense bill that is signed into law, it is law that we fund only within those topic areas, and we cannot fund outside of those. This slide is sharing the full list of the 50 topic areas that our program received for FY23. And you can see highlighted in blue and green respectively, we have new or returning topic areas. So the new topic areas are those that have never before been offered under the PRMRP. And then the green topic areas are those that were offered for a period of time and then fell off the congressional language and are now making a resurgence. And we always like to highlight this because it serves as a really good illustration of the variability of the topic areas that we receive. And, that really reflects the politics behind the receipt of the topic areas for this program. It's also really important to mention that our congressional language does not specify any dollar value attributed to any one of these topic areas. Instead, it's the entire program budget for FY23. It was $370 million that will be split across all of these topic areas. And the split will be determined based on the merit of the applications that we receive under the topic areas. So in order to manage a program that has such variability in topic areas and also that has such a diversity of topic areas affecting numerous different patient communities, we take a portfolio-driven approach where topic areas are grouped together into portfolios based on common physiological systems or common areas of research. Really, the grouping is based on that outreach that we do before vision setting to find out the needs of the patient communities so that we can group together topic areas that have very similar needs, and thus we can set a strategy for the program at the level of the portfolio. All right, so now we're getting into the specific PRMRP award mechanisms that we are offering for 2023. As I just mentioned on the previous slide, we divide our topic areas into portfolios, and then we use those portfolios to set a portfolio level strategy. And that is done by having portfolio level strategic goals. For all of our funding opportunities, applicants must address one topic area, and then based on what portfolio that topic area falls under, they will select the relevant strategic goal that their research will address. And this is how we really let applicants know what the program goals are for that year, is through these strategic goals. All of our award mechanisms are listed here, and you can see we span the entire spectrum of research, everything from very basic early bench discovery work up through and including very large-scale clinical trials. And so I'll go through each of these funding opportunities in just a little bit more detail in the subsequent slides. So the common theme to all of the award mechanisms that I am highlighting on this slide is, one, that the pre-application process for these is just a letter of intent. And so with the letter of intent, it's just a brief one-pager to let us know what your research idea is, with the goal of helping us to plan those peer review panels. And there's no formal review process for that letter of intent. You do not need to wait for an application or an invitation to submit your full application. Anytime after you submit the letter of intent and before the full application deadline, you can go ahead and submit that full application. The other commonality across these three award mechanisms is that clinical trials are not allowed. However, clinical research is allowed for these. So clinical trials are defined as something in which an intervention is being tested in a patient population, whereas clinical research is something where human subjects are being recruited, but there's no intervention testing going on. Just a little bit more detail about these award mechanisms. We first have the Discovery Award mechanism. This is our smallest award at a direct cost maximum of $200,000. And the key thing with this award mechanism is that it is to support highly innovative research. So this is really designed for the program to be a high-risk, high-reward mechanism where it's testing a previously untested theory. So there is not a high burden of preliminary data with this award mechanism. We anticipate that there might be some sort of a failure rate since there's not a lot of preliminary data showing feasibility. The key really is that if it were to be successful, if everything works out as planned, that it should be something that is really innovative, that is going to push the field in a new direction. And of course, we want it to be impactful to the patient community. Next, we have the Investigator-Initiated Research Award mechanism. This is kind of our standard award mechanism that looks a little bit similar to the NIH award R01 mechanism, where it's generally supporting hypothesis-driven research. The thing that really sets this apart is the impact piece, remembering again that consumer patient reviewers will be participating on the peer review panels. We don't want to fund research just for the sake of generating knowledge. We also want to make sure that the knowledge is going to be used to have an impact and improve patient lives. And so that's something that is really important for all of our award mechanisms, but particularly for this one that looks a little bit similar to what some other funding organizations offer, what sets us apart. This award mechanisms comes with two different options. One is just the plain Investigator-Initiated Research Award, which has a direct cost maximum of $1.6 million. And then the other is a partnering option, where two investigators can come together to work jointly on a single proposal. However, each investigator will receive their own independent award for their portion of the work. And so that's to facilitate some team science work. Then the last mechanism on this page is the Technology Therapeutic Development Award mechanism. This is our product-focused award mechanism, where it should be supporting a product into clinical application. A product can be a knowledge product, such as clinical guidance, or it can be a tangible product, such as a drug or device. And we have two different funding levels for this. What sets the two funding levels apart is really how advanced the product is in development. So it's easier to work backwards, explain this one with starting with funding level 2. If you're applying to the funding level 2 option for this award mechanism, the immediate next steps following this should either be clinical application or testing in a clinical trial. So this should be really moving it directly to that first in human stage. If you're not quite there yet and you think you might need some additional funding between having this award ending and really being ready for your first in human, then the funding level 1 is a more appropriate mechanism for you to choose. So the commonality of the three mechanisms shown on this slide is that these are our three mechanisms that allow for interventional clinical trials to take place. So first I'll talk about the Focused Program Award. This is our team science award. And while it does allow clinical trials, a clinical trial is not necessarily required. This is supposed to bring together a minimum of 4 distinct but complementary projects that are working together to address an overarching goal or challenge within the field. And so really the intent here is that while these projects should each be able to stand alone on their own merit, they should be coming together in a way that they can accomplish something when funded all together under this program award than what they would be able to accomplish if they were all funded individually. So the 4 projects can be any subdivision, any combination of basic, hypothesis-driven product development, or clinical trial research. So really anything is game for those, any combination or subset thereof. Next, we have our clinical trial award mechanism. This one is pretty straightforward. It must be used to support a clinical trial. There is no allowance for preclinical animal research to be conducted under this award mechanism. For this one, we do have 2 different options. The clinical trial by itself option is for investigators that are really ready to hit the ground running and begin recruitment and kick off that clinical trial within just a few months of receiving notice of the award. So they should have all regulatory approvals, pretty much ready to go. We require that if the proposed intervention requires a safe to proceed designation from the FDA, such as an IND or an IDE, that those have been submitted at the same time that the application is submitted. So if you're not quite there and not ready to immediately start the clinical trial, say you still need to do that FDA submission, then we have the clinical trial with planning phase mechanism, which allows you a maximum of 18 months to get all of your regulatory approvals in place. And you can also do other activities during that planning phase, such as getting all of your sites on board, setting up the study team, any kind of details that you need to plan the clinical trial, such as that. The planning phase, though, cannot be used to conduct the preclinical animal work. So if you choose the option with the planning phase itself has a direct cost maximum of $500,000. However, once you get into the trial phase, or if you select the option for the clinical trial by itself without the planning phase, there is no direct cost maximum for the clinical trial. And so how we manage this at the program level is that the reasonableness of the budget is a scored criteria, whereas for all of our other award mechanisms where you do have a direct cost maximum set for you, it's usually an unscored criteria. I also want to point out here that since the clinical trial and the focused program award mechanisms are larger mechanisms, and these are a lot of work to put together, we do have a full pre-proposal as the pre-application type for these award mechanisms, where investigators submit a little bit more detail on what they plan to do, and they wait for an invitation to see whether or not the programmatic panel is interested in the research that they're proposing before they move forward with the full application. And then the last mechanism that I'm going to mention on this slide, we're switching back to a mechanism that requires a letter of intent as the pre-application rather than that pre-proposal. This is a brand new award mechanism that we are offering for this year. It is the Lifestyle and Behavioral Health Interventions Award. So this award mechanism can be used to support clinical trials or clinical research. It cannot be used to support animal studies. The key here is that we wanted to identify a niche for some of the clinical trials that were not regulated by the FDA. So we're looking at the types of interventions that would really be quality of life things, something such as nutritional guidelines, exercise recommendations. No sorts of pharmacologicals are allowed under this mechanism, and no invasive devices would be allowed. And then we also want to welcome research that is doing sort of retrospective studies, any sort of epidemiology work, or public health. And so the direct cost maximum for that is $3 million. I do want to point out that if you have one of these interventions, quality of life type interventions that would fall under this award mechanism, but it's a large enough trial that you're going to exceed that $3 million direct cost maximum, these are still eligible for the regular clinical trial mechanism. This was just kind of separating out some of those smaller clinical trials and things that were not FDA regulated so that they could compete more directly with one another. We thought that that would be a better way of doing that. So again, I just want to reiterate some of the commonalities across all 6 of those award mechanisms that I just took you through. And firstly, that is that you must choose one of the topic areas and then one of the portfolio-specific strategic goals. The other thing that is common to all of our award mechanisms is that we require a military health statement. And this statement will be evaluated as part of the programmatic review criteria. So we do have in our congressional language that the research should be relevant to the healthcare needs of service members, veterans, military beneficiaries, and or the American public. And depending on your specific research and the area that you're looking at, whether it's relevant to service members or veterans, or whether it's something that might speak a little bit more towards mission readiness by affecting a family member or the general American public, we have some suggestions for how you can craft this statement within our program announcement with a few different ideas that you can take on how to do this. We do also encourage, I don't want to put the AAKP too much on this spot here, but it might be a good idea to reach out with the advocacy groups to get some information. They might have some statistics on incidence of the disease or other information that might be helpful to you or just be a good sounding board for this, since a lot of times they were involved in the lobbying efforts for the funds being added under the Department of Defense budget. They usually are a great resource for crafting this statement. So as I mentioned on a couple of the slides, we have these portfolio level strategic goals. I am just showing the example here of our internal medicine portfolio because most of the topic areas relevant to kidney disease fall within this portfolio. And you'll see that strategic goals are the specific little bullet points here, and they're organized under the continuum of care. So we have foundational studies, strategic goals, as well as those for prevention, some for diagnosis. And they continue on to the next slide. But before we move there, I just want to mention that this is really meant to be a mix and match approach. So for any one of the strategic goals, there should be several topic areas that it is applicable to. And for every topic area, there should be several applicable strategic goals for you to choose from. So this just finishes up those strategic goals with the last 2 components of the continuum of care for treatment and epidemiology. So just sharing the internal medicine portfolio as an example, the full list of all of the portfolios and all of the strategic goals can be found in any one of our PRMRP award mechanism program announcements. All right, so we are nearing the end, I promise. But I just want to give you a, final take home for application success to make sure you really carefully read the program announcement and specifically the peer review criteria. I went through each of our award mechanisms and hopefully I emphasized well enough that there are different intents to each of those award mechanisms and they are reflected by specific peer review criteria for each of the award mechanisms. So our peer review criteria differ across our award mechanisms, and it's really important that you take note of those to make sure you're hitting all of those points and that you're speaking to the criteria that are most important for the mechanism that you are applying to. And then I also want to mention that similarly, the programmatic review criteria is also listed in all of the program announcements. Again, it's very important to make sure you take a look at these and make sure you're speaking to all of these within your application. However, as opposed to the peer review criteria that vary from mechanism to mechanism, the programmatic review criteria are the same across all. This slide is just hopefully providing you with a handy reference for some of our deadlines and summarizing the pre-application type that is required for each. So you can see the pre-application type, either the letter of intent or the pre-proposal. The pre-proposal one that being the one that requires an invitation before you are allowed to submit the full application. We have the deadlines for that pre-proposal submission, and then shown in the last column on the far right is the final application deadline for the full proposal. We are very strict about these application deadlines. So usually it'll specify something like 5 p.m. Eastern time or midnight. And, if it says 5 p.m. Eastern time and it comes in at 5:01 Eastern time, unfortunately, it has missed the deadline and it's not something that we can accept. So make sure you plan ahead. You don't want to run into a little delay with uploading documents or something like that and miss the deadline because of it. So make sure you take note of those. Just concluding with a few additional tips, resources, and strategies for success. Some of these things will be summarizing a little bit of what I went through on the previous slide. So I emphasized it with making sure that you look for the peer review criteria in the program announcement, but I cannot emphasize enough that you should read the announcement carefully. In addition to the peer review criteria, we also have those portfolio level strategic goals in there and really good descriptions about the award intent. We do these webinars with large group audiences in order to highlight the funding opportunities that we offer, but we do not do any sort of one-on-one consultation with a given applicant. It's something that can be perceived as giving an individual applicant a competitive advantage in our funding process. And so we really put all of the information that an applicant should need to understand what our program goals are, what the intent of the award mechanism is, all of the criteria that they need to meet to be eligible for that award mechanism within the program announcement to try and avoid the need for individual applicants of engaging with the program office and doing something that might be perceived as the program office giving an advantage to one applicant over another. All right, so this is just kind of summarizing all of our strategies for success. And relevance is really an important component for our award mechanisms in a variety of different aspects. So one is relevance to the program specific goals, but then also we have that relevance to military health statement that I spoke about. So make sure you take careful consideration to those statements because those are something that are part of the programmatic review criteria. I also want to re-emphasize the importance of impact. We're here because of the patients, and so we want to make sure that all of the applications that we are funding are hitting the right impact for the patient community and are really going to lead to something that will make a difference in the patient's life. That can be something in the short or long term based on the mechanism that you're applying to, but it should be something that is leading to an impactful solution for the patient. Innovation, that is really something that is most important for our discovery award mechanism. But again, for everything, it's nice if we can be bringing new solutions to the patients, trying to think a little bit outside the box and coming up with, really moving the field forward in a new direction, something that could be groundbreaking. And then also feasibility. This is important kind of for all mechanisms, but it's important depending on the award mechanism that you're applying to, that you take careful note of what sort of feasibility criteria that you need to meet, whether it's showing rationale from the literature or showing appropriate preliminary data to really justify that you can do what you're saying you're going to be able to do and speak to our funding panels on why this might not be such a risky thing for them to invest in. Give them a little bit of confidence that it will be successful. Again, I just want to emphasize the point of planning and timelines. We're very strict on the deadlines for submitting our applications. We are not allowed to allow late submissions. The only kind of circumstance under which we can is in the event of a national disaster. If there's a big hurricane or something along those lines, a tornado wipes out, a large area, we will offer extensions to the communities affected by that type of natural disaster where you have a large area that's without power or something like that. But in the absence of those types of extenuating circumstances, no extensions are given. And then with any application process, grantsmanship is very important. Keep in mind that we will have consumer reviewers looking at your proposals. Particularly, we ask for a lay abstract, which is something that the consumer reviewers look at. It should be something that's really unburdened by jargon and is able to be understood by the consumer. And then also keep in mind that the programmatic panel has some varying fields of scientific expertise. And so you want to make sure that you're writing your application in such a way that it can be generally understood by various fields. All right, I just want to take a moment to mention that we do have some additional resources. I focused the majority of the talk today on the peer-reviewed medical research program, but I encourage you to look at the CDMRP website as a whole because there's program pages. You can get some additional information about PRMRP there as well as our other programs. And then you can also take a look at awards that we have funded in the past. And we have some other, really useful information on there, such as the webinar series. This slide is just showing you how you can subscribe to be alerted when new funding opportunities are released. Our funding opportunities for 2023 have already gone out, but this is always a good time if you are not already signed up to make sure that you take a minute and sign up to receive subscriptions so that you will be notified when the opportunities are released for 2024. When you click on the link, either through the CDMRP website or the EBRAP website, you are taken to a menu where you can select the specific programs that are of interest to you. So you won't be overburdened in receiving every email blast that comes out of CDMRP. You can select and receive only those that are interest to you and relevant to your research. All right, and this is just showing some screenshots of that webinar series that I had mentioned that is on the CDMRP website. Gives some more details on the commonalities to our review processes that are shared across all of the CDMRP programs. And there's also some really specific ones, such as there's a webinar on team science funding opportunities, which would be relevant to the PRMRP Focus Program Award. So I really suggest that you take a look at those and see what bits of nuggets of useful information you can pick up that might help you with crafting your application. So with that, I will just conclude by sharing again the CDMRP website, and I am happy to answer any questions that you all might have.
Thank you, Dr. Argue, for sharing this presentation on the peer-reviewed medical research program. We do have a few questions that people submitted when they registered for the webinar that I'm hoping you can address. So the first question is, as a care partner to a loved one who has suffered greatly from PKD, a covered disease under the CDMRP program, is my interest in being a consumer reviewer as strong as the patient? My husband is just not well enough to be involved, but I'm very interested.
So a brief answer to that question is yes, caregivers of patients affected by our topic areas are more than welcome to serve as consumer reviewers. We welcome patients, caregivers, and in some cases, medical professionals, anyone who is willing to speak to the patient perspective. And also it is important to keep in mind that caregiver perspective, because that speaks to a huge burden within the field of need of what the caregiver is going through and how we might be able to make their lives easier. So that is something that we take into consideration. Anyone that is interested in serving as a peer reviewer for CDMRP, there is a link on the CDMRP website. Up across the top of our toolbar, you'll see a little link for consumers, and there's a drop down for there where you can get your questions answered about what the eligibility requirements are to serve as a consumer reviewer. And there's also an application that you can fill out if after reviewing that information, you do decide that you would like to participate in our review process.
Thank you for responding to that first question. Our second question is, I am a researcher supporting several medical innovations. If we are focused on supporting a device that would support patients with one of the diseases in the schedule of diseases CDMRP is currently covering, should we apply?
So the simple answer to this, without knowing too many more specifics, is that yes, we do support research for devices. So anywhere where we're talking about treatments, devices are considered within that umbrella. So device research is more than welcome. It's just a matter of looking at the program announcements and finding the one that is most applicable to the device that you are developing and where you are in the development process.
Thank you. Next question. If our research is related to the care of patients suffering from one of the medical conditions covered under the CDMRP program, specifically innovative new quality metrics and reimbursement models, could they be considered under the CDMRP PRMRP mechanism?
So we really welcome all different types of research. So the important thing is that you're doing a research project of some sort, and that you can fit your research project into, first of all, the topic areas, which it sounds like you're already there. But the second piece of this would be to take a look at the strategic goals and see if what you're thinking about proposing fits within one of the portfolio specific strategic goals that we have. And then, of course, it's welcome. It's really something that we leave up to the individual applicants to make their own case on why what they are proposing fits within the need of the topic area and fits within the strategic goal and is compliant for the award mechanism that they are choosing. But there's really no prohibitions on, certain types of research not being allowed or anything like that. So those types of policy research projects are welcome.
Thank you. And last question for you. Kidney stones are a common cause of morbidity among active military and veterans and can impact combat readiness. Have there been any programs or funding directed towards this? And if not, how should AAKP best represent this concern to congressional leaders who fund the program?
So to answer the first part of the question, there are not currently any programs with specific funding for kidney stones. So with the peer-reviewed medical research program and any of our CDMRP programs that are focused within a disease-specific condition, it's really important for us to make sure that we're following that congressional intent and not funding outside the topic areas or the title of the program or any indications within the congressional language. So for peer-reviewed medical research program, where we have polycystic kidney disease and focal segmental glomerulosclerosis and nephrotic syndrome, we really need to stick within those specific types of kidney disease and cannot necessarily open that up on our own determination for an application on kidney stones. The best way to change that language is just through lobbying efforts and engagement with Congress. They're the ones who draft the language. They decide on the CDMRP programs, the budgets they receive, as well as any specifics about the topic areas or any other details that they want to include in the language on what that program should focus on.
Thank you, Dr. Argue. We appreciate the program today. It was a great presentation.
All right. Thanks, Jerome. It was a pleasure to be here today.
If anyone has additional questions about today's webinar, please send those questions to info@aakp.org. I like to close today's webinar with a few slides on additional resources that may be of interest to you. If you are not already a member of AAKP, we encourage you to join. AAKP offers free membership to patients and their family members, as well as living kidney donors. To become a free member, join online at aakp.org or by phone by calling 1-800-749-2257. To receive all the benefits of membership, please be sure to include your email address when signing up. As an AAKP member, you will be notified by email when opportunities arise where your opinion and experiences are needed to help inform innovation, advance care, and make a meaningful impact to improve lives. We encourage you to respond to our flash surveys and other engagement opportunities to help us elevate the patient voice and change the status quo for kidney disease care. You can also select to receive any of our 5 different electronic newsletters and subscribe to our printed magazine, AAKP Renal Life. We also invite you to follow us on our blog and social media for all the latest news and announcements. AAKP is dedicated to helping kidney patients across the disease spectrum understand their condition and take control of their health care. We are proud to offer a variety of resources for both patients and caregivers. By visiting our website at aakp.org and clicking on the AAKP Store button at the top of the homepage, you can find a variety of educational brochures and online tools to order or download, including Coping, Living, and Thriving with Kidney Disease. You can also order materials by phone. We are pleased to present our annual signature events, such as our 5th annual Global Summit on Kidney Innovations in partnership with George Washington University School of Medicine and Health Sciences, AAKP's 6th annual Public Policy Summit, the 48th annual National Patient Meeting, and 5th annual AAKP Fun Walk. Let us know which events you are interested in participating in by filling out a brief SurveyMonkey form, and we'll be sure to notify you when registration is open. You can also visit our YouTube channel to watch presentations on demand from our 2022 events and programs. We'd again like to thank Paul Conway and Dr. Catherine Argue for sharing about the important work of the Department of Defense Congressionally Directed Medical Research Program. Thank you for joining us today.